Well, hello to everyone who has joined us today. I am really grateful to be here with Sasha Bajjo. Did I pronounce that?
You did.
All right. And I am really excited that we were connected by a dear mutual friend because both Sasha and I have had near-death experiences. And I felt it would be valuable to capture whatever direction our conversation goes today. I just know that it's going to be rich and wonderful. So, Sasha, would you tell us a little bit um, about the work that you do that will tell us a little bit about who you really choose to be in the world? So,
Thank you. Sure, I'd love to. So, yes, my name's Sasha. I'm a mystic. And that's like a combination of all things. I study syncretism, which is the connection between all systems, beliefs, sciences. So the basis is astrology, but I grew up fundamental Christian, and I went to a private Christian school, so I was familiar with Catholicism, and then I moved to public school, so then I had a lot of friends who were Muslim. And then as a young adult, I encountered the other Eastern religions, and I explored Buddhism and Zen and Hinduism, all the things. And I've made a lot of connections over the years and just deepened them. And now I'm a life coach for women. I focus on what I call higher self alignment, stepping into who you really are at your core and your soul. And I do that through healing anger, shame, and guilt, because those are the main things that sort of block us in and box us into, adjusting, quote unquote, adjusting to society. And I help women tap into their peace, pleasure, and joy. And I do that with breath work, mindfulness, meditation, somatic movement, and guided meditations or hypnosis.
wow. Wow. And yay.
Yeah.
um, wow. That's wonderful. Well, I know that um, just from hearing that little bit about your story in different ways, we walk the same path. Um, and I know that I also, was raised very traditional Catholic, was on the path to enter the convent. And then I had my near-death experience at 17, which that was the kind of pivot point from traditional Christian orientation to be more curious about spiritual, because I needed to find a context, a different context, or come to understand how what I had experienced was beyond that box that.
Yeah.
And I know that by the time so it became my path to understand more about death and dying through my curiosity about my near-death experience, and through my own near-death experience that maybe 3 or 4 years later was, or maybe 5, was followed by the death of my grandmother, the death of a college friend of mine, and the death of the youngest son of one of my dear colleague friends at the time. I was involved in childbirth education, and her little guy died on Mother's Day, drowned in their hot tub. So wow. That, and then throw in a couple of earthquakes in California, it was enough to say, oh, wait a minute, what does death mean? And why is all of this anxiety? What I got clearer about at that point was I wasn't really afraid of death. I was afraid of life. It's like, yeah. So that's why and then in college went to another pivot point for me was, or at least another clarifying piece to the mosaic for me, was that I attended a world religions class, and that,
Yep. Yeah, opens it.
Yeah, it opens it. And so I'm just really eager to see where we go with this conversation. given that we have similar but different backgrounds, or at least the sounds like we have similar intentions. Because I say I work from womb to tomb. You know, I started
I
out
like that.
with being a birth doula, and then transition points all through life. Very involved in women's issues, with women's empowerment, women's awakening.
Yeah.
And now, as you know, a gray-haired woman wondering, why are we still marching about the same stuff that I was marching about back when? So let's dive in. Tell me a little bit, if you would, about your near-death experience.
Sure. So I made a lot of connections while you were talking as well. You know, my first experience with death was when I was 12 years old. My grandmother died, and my parents were newly divorced or separated, you know, going through that process. So my dad, we couldn't reach him at the time. So my mother, being her personality type and just, you know, placing my family into roles, I was sent to the hospital to be a representative for our family. And so at the age of 12, yeah, sitting at this conference table with my aunts and uncles and the doctors and the surgeons deciding what to do with my grandmother. And I didn't, you know, you're not aware of death that much until it's right in front of you, and you realize there are decisions about it. And so that was really eye-opening and a little overwhelming, of course. But, you know, her passing had its own quantum aspects to it as well. So then a year later, I was at a class end of the year party, summer party, and we were playing Marco Polo in the pool, which my teacher, because this is, you know, decades ago, and there just wasn't as much structure, or people weren't really looking out for certain things. And so the deck wasn't finished, and the pool was above ground and surrounded by concrete slabs on a hill. We're playing Marco Polo and we're bouncing around and people's eyes are closed, and I jumped up to hide and I slid over the pool and fell down onto a concrete slab. And everybody was in the pool playing and their eyes were closed, so they didn't know where I was, and I didn't know where I was. And so I was just laying there, and in that moment I literally felt my soul leave my body, and I had my first out-of-body experience. And so I was laying on my back, but I was up in the sky looking down at myself, and I knew, like, oh, I'm leaving, like, this is dying. This is what dying feels like. And it wasn't scary at all, you know. It was just like, this is not what I anticipated at all, and it's not bad, you know. I was just like, wow, I thought it was supposed to hurt. And I was out of the pool for at least 2 minutes, and then people started saying, where's Sasha? Where's Sasha? And I'm up there going, do I go back down or not? And I heard my best friend say, Sasha, where are you? And I was like, well, I don't want her to be upset. And like, I like shot back down into my body, and I just said, I'm here. And then they like came and got me, dragged me up, brought me out, asked me, do you want to go back in the pool? And I was like, I guess so. So I got back in, and then I was like, I don't think so. So then I got out, sat on the side, and just kind of sat in that, you know, what now I call awe and wonder. Like, I just had it all, you know, like I understood it all. And it wasn't like my life flashed before my eyes, but I think it was because so little of my life had happened that there wasn't much to consider. Right. And so I think that's part of why it was easier too, to be like, well, maybe I'll just go. Like, I don't mind being with God. And, you know, I was in Christian school, so I was like, well, if this is going to be with God, that's not so bad. I could go now. But I came back and I was never the same. And so then I went through like,
describe never the same. What does never the same look like?
Never the same is I always had, like, then suddenly the scriptures started speaking to me differently. And I became fascinated with two people, well, a few people. I'll start with three people, which is Mary, because Mary took these things and pondered them in her heart. And I was like, I just became aware of like the pondering, and I just started pondering everything all the time. And, you know, that was like my mystical initiation. And then I really started to resonate with John the Baptist, who was this like mystic in the desert telling everybody that Jesus was coming. And he was just this crazy guy that nobody understood. And I'm like, no, like I got a glimpse of what he saw. Like I get it now. Like things are different and there's so much that we can't explain. And there's so, like this whole death and rebirth thing. I was like, this is really it. And, because that peace that I felt when I left my body was the same peace that I felt when I received, the gift of the Holy Ghost, which in fundamental Christian churches, you receive the Holy Ghost and, you accept Jesus, he takes away your sins. And my particular Christian sect is particularly radical or whatever. I forget the word for it, but we speak in tongues, we're holy rollers. And so you do have a truly mystical experience where now they call it light language, speaking in tongues, like suddenly things are just pouring out of you, the joy of the Lord and all this stuff and that holy fire. And then when, in the church, the Spirit of God would descend and it was like seeing spirits, like I would see angels, and I could literally see the presence of God like it was like a cloud or a mist. They say that in the upper room it like descends, and I would just see it descend every time. And I would just be sitting in my seat like, do people see what I see
Yeah.
happening right now? But they're all focused here, and that's fine, that's great. But I was just witnessing. And so then I became this witness. So when I became a young adult and I started really talking more about spirituality, I would just tell people, I'm just a witness on this planet. Like, I don't call myself a disciple of Christ or anything. I'm literally just a witness. I'm just here to watch and observe and like show God what I'm seeing through my eyes, basically. So that's how things were never the same again, because life, it just didn't matter anymore. But it wasn't, at first I was angry that it didn't matter anymore. And then I was depressed and kind of jaded that it didn't matter anymore. And I got really, what now they call emo. I was just like, nothing matters. Like, none of this is real. None of it is real. Why am I here? Why did I choose to come back? I just was really perplexed at the choice I made in that moment. I chose one person to come back for, basically. But there was a reason in that for sure. And then it took me about, that I was probably 14 when I was still going through the angst about it. And not until I was...
How was it received when you would talk about it? Within your religious structure at the time, was there an acceptance to you being different in that way?
There was a certain level of acceptance. I only spoke to certain people about it. And so we were very gendered. So like we didn't do a lot of co-ed stuff because that leads to bad things.
Yes.
So when I was in prayer circles with certain sisters, I could confide in them and say, like when I talk to God, I see this. And when I feel angels' presence, I like feel them and I feel their wings. I can hear them flapping, like and I was like, I've seen Michael, I've seen Gabriel. And people were like, that, okay, like certain levels of it were okay. And then we were very Bible focused. So they would just reroute me to the scriptures. Well, just read about this person instead. Read about this person instead. And that served a purpose for sure, because I could start to understand the stories that the people in the Bible were telling about their experiences and different prayers that people spoke. And, there's stories of really coming to terms with God as spirit, and then I became really, really attracted, I guess, to the story of Jacob, when he wrestled with the angel all night and was like, I will not let go until I receive my blessing. And I was like, okay, like this is, and then I was starting to understand the law of attraction. I became acquainted with Louise Hay and Abram Hicks and all that. And so I was like, that's manifestation. Like you set your intention and you choose to believe that until it manifests in your physical experience. And then like people started coming to me because I shifted between the ages of 20 and 21 from being really angry and protesty and like nothing's wrong with protesting, but I was even angry at protesting. Like I would go there and then I would just be mad that I was even there. Like, because again, this whole concept of like, well, nothing really matters. I was like, I keep getting riled up, but I already know that we all just die and we're all living and dying at the same time. So I'm losing my train of thought. I'm trying to come back to
So in your 20s, and that's where you shifted
oh
from.
yes, yeah, so something shifted. Thank you. I had like an experience of deep surrender one day, and it wasn't that I let it all go, but I had like an experience that was more quantum than mystical. It was very it was like a spiritual surgery, they call it now, but I didn't have a shaman. I was just like laying there and I went into my mind and I could see all the stories that made me upset, and I could see the peace that I wanted to experience, and I rerouted my neurons and built bridges over them and rerouted to what I wanted to feel so I wouldn't get caught in the negative loops anymore.
Yes.
And the next day I went to work and I didn't tell anybody, but people are like, you're different. What's changed? And I was like, well, I kind of like did surgery on my brain last night in my head. Does that make sense? And they're like, we don't know, but we like you. And like, we've always liked you, but it's nice to see you happy for a change. And I appreciated that in a way, like because then you become more and more self-aware and you're like, wow, I really was a little visibly unhappy even when I was trying to hide it, you know? So then you have to deal with all that and let that go too. And then people began coming to me for advice and counseling, and that turned into coaching. And just a few years ago, people were like, why aren't you charging for this yet? Like, this should be a business.
Right.
But I was, I was in this mindset of being spiritual meant that you do things for free and you just labor tirelessly in service to the Lord or something like that,
Right.
But
As
then
as you're talking, it is interesting to me how you spoke about your thought process when you slid out of the pool, slid over and went down on the concrete embankment and were out of body. How different words, but the words that express the same feeling of, well, this won't be so bad.
Yeah.
It isn't as scary as everybody said it was going to be.
Yeah.
I remember my near-death experience was near drowning. And, I remember all of the bubbles and all of the turbulence and the sounding of the freight train being caught in an undertow. No, not able to tell what's up, what's down. It's like you go through the linear mind process of how can I resolve this? How can I problem solve this? And then I got to that moment of surrender. And so it was that, my last thought was, this won't be such a bad way to go.
Right.
And then comes the surrender, because you're not fighting it or resisting it. You're going, you move beyond linear thought, and it becomes that transitional thought, that surrender thought. And I also heard you talk about, again, your indoctrination and was more fundamental Christian. Mine was Catholic. It was still that belief that Judgment Day was to be, that my understanding of it was like, you got to review all of the bad stuff. You had to confess your sins.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in that instantaneous non-instant of whatever I experienced, or there is no there, right. So wherever that there was that I wasn't, from that place, And that review, it was a very curious, instantaneous, when they say your life flashes before your eyes.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it was in my experience, where, hey, it's all good.
Yeah.
And just kind of like take note, this, that, but it's all good. Even
Yeah.
the not so good is all good.
Right.
Then they came, and I didn't have the experience of viewing my body until I was on the beach. From there, it was that observing,
Yeah.
and then being back in my body. And from the 17-year-old, my sister, the guy who eventually became my husband, my ex-husband, but my boyfriend and another friend of ours, it was the four of us. And it was kind of like the, don't tell mom, we weren't supposed to be, like, we're so glad you're back because,
Yeah.
and so they're just content that I'm alive, but they have no idea what I've experienced.
Yeah.
It did not feel like, I just didn't fit back in my body. I
Right.
was forever
Yeah.
changed. And I'm older than you, clearly. It was at that time, nobody was talking about this stuff.
Right.
And the little I talked about it, like, hey, did you guys, like, comparing notes, and this is what I just got very quickly, like, don't talk about it. And I didn't talk with my parents, my mom, about it, because we're not supposed to be body surfing, drowning,
Yeah.
So that thing that you said about, like, I don't fit my body anymore. I'm back. And that confusion of, from my Catholic paradigm, it was, I had that experience of overwhelming white light energy. It wasn't like, the only way to put words to it is that no body, an illuminating presence is all I was.
Yeah.
I was one. I got it. It's that I got it.
Yeah.
So coming back in was, and continued to be harsh. And it was because my Catholic indoctrination was, I was somehow, as my immature self, it was, I'm being punished. I have to go back. I didn't do it right.
Exactly. I thought I had more work to do.
Yeah. So I don't belong. I don't fit. I've done it wrong. So there was shame or regret or not understanding. Somehow I got that I was to be a bridge person, and that there is no there. My role is to hold a space for heaven on earth, to help people see that heaven is an energy. God is an energy, not a he, not a she, not an it. It's a life force that is beyond words. So when we say, that God was the word, as soon as we attached a label to it, it doesn't fit. It's not adequate to express.
Right.
So one of the reasons I was eager also to speak with you, well, because nobody was talking about it then. It started me on my journey of studying with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and beginning to, for a long time, I didn't read other people's accounts
Mm-hmm.
So it was validating, but they were like different enough. It was validating to go, oh, maybe I'm not crazy. Like, what are all these other people? How did
Right.
they feel that?
Yeah.
And then what do you do with it when nobody is talking about it? So that's when I had these deaths, a couple of earthquakes,
Mm-hmm.
and started studying with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross to make sense of all of that. And here I am now. I almost said at the end of my life, but it's towards, no matter how you slice it, I have fewer years ahead than I do behind, from that first breath to whenever that last breath happens in
Mm-hmm.
this little minute
Yeah.
particle of existence.
Yeah.
Um, it's that whole curiosity about, now I'm very involved in helping people write their advance directives and
Mm-hmm.
wanting very much to have the conversation about death and dying, to be
Yeah.
there when people choose medically assisted death, choose VSED, or just at bedside for
Mm-hmm.
family and friends. And there is that, I don't know if you have experienced that doubt, like, did I make that up? Was that real? Whatever
Yeah,
real is.
definitely. Because I told my ex-husband about my experience early on in our relationship, and he was an incredibly agnostic skeptic. And so I was like, I had this thing, like they say it's called an NDE, like other people have felt this way, but like I didn't walk down a tunnel, but I know that I went to that place. And
Right.
he was like, no, you just blacked out. I black out all the time. It's just your brain just turned off for a second. It was only a second, even though he wasn't there. He was just like, there's no way that happened, period. And
Right.
then I was like, oh geez, like he's smarter than me. What if he's right? You know? But
Right.
it took me a while to learn and understand that it's not like, oh, the smarter you are, the less you believe, but like there's almost like a hardening of the heart that comes with needing proof, reason and logic, because the universe is the logos. It is all knowing. It's all there if you tap into it, but you don't need a book for
Yeah.
it. And
Yes.
it's hard to reason with those people. So eventually I stopped trying. I learned like, okay, we don't need to have this conversation. I'll just hang out with the people who get it, and that'll be good.
Right. Right. And there was something else you said about somehow talking about it. The more, when there is that feeling that sometimes information moves through me
Mm-hmm.
that is all part of whatever that
Yeah,
awareness is that got, you know.
yeah.
So sometimes I'm very empathic too. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if, so it's that, how do I be very mindful of when I hold a
Mm-hmm.
space for others, so
Yeah.
that I am protected isn't the right word, but
But yeah, I get what you mean for sure. And like,
yeah,
so yeah, I'm a guide
so
now. I
raw,
guide
so
people to
open.
that place.
You're right.
Yeah. But I definitely, I'm, I do create containers wherever I go, basically, because depending on who I'm with, or if I'm with a client or something, I do open the channel and I'm just channeling. So it
Well,
has to be for the right person, and I have to be able to, um, it's almost like, it's like, I read a book, which the name is escaping me, but right around that time of my NDE, like the right books came to me, like A Wrinkle in Time and things like that. And so wielding balls of light became my thing to do when I was outside. And so as a guide and as a coach, whatever you want to call me, even when I'm just on a Facebook Live, it's almost like I've expanded that ball of light and I know when to pull it in and when to let it back out.
Right, right. Yeah. And sometimes the magic works and sometimes it doesn't, that whole thing
Mhm.
of practicing.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I can't, it doesn't seem that I am as discerning at times because it just moves through.
Well, when I first began not knowing what was happening, because I went through a period in my life when I had that spiritual awakening and I rewired my brain and made the switch. I
Yeah.
was like channeling most of the time. So I was incredibly telepathic and psychic and empathetic. And sometimes I would say to a person like, wow, you're really angry about that thing that happened a few days ago. And they're like, what are you talking about? You don't know what you're talking about. Yes, that happened, but I don't like that you need to stop. You're too
Right.
intense. Like, stop whatever you're doing. And, I would accidentally read my husband's mind and talk to him, and he would say, get out of my head. And I'd be like, oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I can't. Like, I didn't know how to manage the magic yet. And
Yeah.
so I did have to practice a lot with my energetic boundaries and my aura, my auric field and all that. And then also too, because then some days you walk outside and you get whammied and you're like, oh my God, I feel so bad today. I thought I was having a good day. And then you're like,
Right.
oh, something bad happened in the world. That's what I was feeling. It
Yes.
wasn't me. So
Yeah.
I had to learn that discernment as well of like, this is my space. And then I can just like read what's on the outside without taking it in.
Yeah. That whole intuitive part that got awakened, I believe, through that experience. And my youngest daughter is also incredibly empathic and intuitive. And I can remember situations when she was a teen, the one in particular, where when she was a teen, I was home baking. I had the thought, this was pre-cell phone, pre-text, anything, that's
Mhm.
how old I am. It's where I thought, I need eggs. I wish there were a way I could get in touch with Dana,
Mhm.
my daughter. And, 4 or 5 minutes later, she comes through the front door with a dozen eggs.
Yeah.
Saying, I don't know why. I just know that here are the
Yeah.
eggs.
Yeah.
And when she was little, visiting one of the Holocaust camps, when
Mhm.
she was 6 or 7, we had barely 7, we had the opportunity. And I didn't tell her much at that point. I just said, we're going to a historical site. Well, we walked in, we weren't very far within that. I kept walking across this huge, very sad, creepy compound.
Mhm.
And I turned around and she's just there with tears
Yeah.
rolling down her eyes saying, Mommy, what happened here? What happened to the women and the children? You know,
Yeah.
um, so that intuitive openness, but it gets so tampered down
Yes.
by religion and judgments and the need to fit everything into a box.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah,
that
definitely.
I guess I'm at a point now in my life where I don't. it's There is no box.
Yeah.
We're born, we come through the tunnel, we're put in a box, then we're put in a bigger box, then we're put in the school box and the marriage box and
Mhm.
all the boxes. You get to the point where you're thinking about either the coffin or the urn box or the
Mhm.
cardboard box under the overpass, and you go, you know what? There really is no box. That's what I
Mhm.
learned. That's what I know.
Yeah.
Might as well just live it and care
Mhm.
less about the judgments,
Yeah.
not make myself as small. But
Yeah.
so how another thing that you mentioned was the belief that we learned that women learned, um, in particular, that and religion really took women and said, you are going to be the servants, you're going to be the ones who suffer.
Yeah, you said you were going to go to the convent, and my plan was to go to Bible college, meet a man who was going to be a minister, and marry him and start a church. And
Yeah,
that's the roadmap.
yeah. And that you can't make money doing this type of work. And I know
Right.
that we have, myself and two other women have started what's called Dying Matters Guild here in our community, and to bring together all of the people, the death worker people, all of
Yeah.
the people who are from the doulas to the coaches to the funeral directors, like creating a space where we can cross refer and get to know one another. But it is like somehow the funeral person can charge a whole lot of
Yeah.
money for their services,
Mm-hmm.
but a death doula who's sitting at bedside holding this
Yeah.
space for someone,
Yeah.
like you can't, or there's that.
Yeah, you can barter for bread or something.
Right,
You
right.
know?
The judgment's about money, making money. You can't charge somebody who's dying or they don't have resources. So how do you help those who don't have resources? And do you do the Robin Hood thing of
Mm-hmm.
take from the rich to give to the poor? As I think we're all still trying to figure out what our relationship is with money.
Yeah.
So
But we all have to turn on that, like you said, the rich mind, which is just like money is everywhere. And it's
yes,
always there and it's always going to be there. And when you accept that, then you can receive it and just trust it's coming, you know?
well, it is trusting the awareness,
Mhm.
the expansion that I feel we both experienced in that
Yeah.
instant,
Yeah.
to trust that more than your ego mind is telling you.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it is that direction, or here, this is what you're going back to do,
Yeah.
if there's something to do. But I knew that I was to hold the presence for there being a bridge, that
Mm-hmm.
heaven isn't a place,
Yeah.
it's an energy, and it can be
Yeah.
experienced even when life is really messy.
Exactly. That's exactly what I do too, you know. I called it for a long time. I was like, I'm a guide, I'm a way shower. And now I say like I'm a mystic, like, but anybody can have mystical experiences, and I encourage everyone to, because that is how you experience the heaven that's within. And there's all
Yeah.
these, when I was diving into the Bible, and like I said, Jacob wrestling with the angel at this place called Pineal, and I was like the pineal gland, like your third eye. And I was like,
Yeah,
oh my God. And then one guy that I follow, he was like, the Bible is a map of the human body, like pay attention. I was like, oh my God, it's all here. It's literally all here.
it
And
is.
so
It is.
yeah, it's just
Oh, I got chills
amazing.
on that one. Yeah. So you must be familiar with, or I would suspect you're familiar with, all of Joe Dispenza's work and
Oh
that
yeah.
whole,
Yeah, the brainstem.
yeah, yeah. So it is a whole journey of questioning, really questioning everything we held as true,
Yeah.
everything we were given as true,
Hmm.
and making friends with uncertainty, like those who
That's so
will
perfect.
survive, or beyond, those who will blossom or expand
Mm-hmm.
with being able to not experience the life comes with pain,
Yes.
and then the suffering part is optional.
Yeah, it's a choice, and it's a hard sell, but but
Yeah.
that's what it is. And I have a dear friend, and rest in peace, he last year transitioned or had a rebirth. He had stage 4, some kind of brain cancer. He'd had multiple surgeries, but he was still experiencing pain, so he decided to document his last like 6 months of life in this body. And he
Yes.
called it his death rebirth portal, and we all just witnessed him every day being like, I'm taking a cold shower now because I'm aware of some pain. And sometimes my awareness of the pain is very strong, but really beautiful things are happening. And he would just like start channeling these amazing, profound things. And he was like, I just have to get the rest of this out and then I'll be done. So just please bear with me while I moan and then I'll continue, you know? And it was just really wonderful. And I missed his actual transition, but it was live streamed. And then the next day I caught the celebration and it turned into like a 3-day gathering, you know? People opened up their homes. Like some guy in Hawaii was like, come live here. I'll pay for anybody that you want to stay here, record everything, use the space, go live every day. Like he had a TikTok, a Facebook, YouTube. And it was just really beautiful to be a part of, you know, and just to accept like, yeah, this is it. And, you know, it's an awareness and it's a choosing, because he was like, I'm not suffering. Don't tell me that I'm suffering. I'm just aware that there's some pain in my body, but I'm not suffering. I'm choosing to complete what I want to say because I decided there's something that I want to say before I leave. And it was just really brilliant, you know, because you can juxtapose that with, so I had a couple of other death stories, which is that when I was 15, my sister, she had a near-death experience that was even more, I mean, she died technically, and my little nephew died full term because she was sick and the doctors ignored her. They thought she was a stressed out pregnant lady, but she was like, no, there's really something wrong, and they missed it. So she was dead on the table for 3 months. My nephew died, and I'd never experienced a grief so savage. It really just, I could feel it cut me open. And it was so painful. And my whole family felt it because we loved her. So we literally all felt it as it was happening. And we just had to like get there as soon as we could. And then I was so furious with God. Like, why did you make me come back and you took her baby? Like, that is messed up.
Yeah.
Why did you do that? You know, like, don't ever do that again.
Like when my grandmother died, well, she's old. I can do, you know, it bumped me into my mortality when my friend died. And then to have a baby, it's like, how does that make sense?
Right. It was really difficult, and our family was wrecked for years. And then my aunt got ovarian cancer, which now, of course, we're aware, like the feminine wounding, and she had a lot of feminine wounding and self-esteem issues and all of that stuff. So now I totally understand that aspect of her journey. But she was really afraid of dying. So she resisted the whole way, which of course society supports and encourages. So they're like, yeah, fight it, fight it, fight it. But like her soul was just asking for peace. And if I really feel if she had chosen to surrender, she would have had more time to tell us what she wanted to say, because she spent so much time fighting that then when it became too close to the end, she didn't have enough time to tell us what she wanted to tell us because they started pumping her with morphine.
Again,
so
we've recently had that conversation. The whole paradigm we are taught, we've all been indoctrinated by the whole war. It's a power over model of war that we're experiencing now. War against cancer, war against drugs. Anything you fight against, you have to become the energy of in order.
What you resist persists.
And that fighting, those people who sadly took on that belief that fighting cancer is the thing that you just have to do, often because the people who are left behind are feeling their grief and want there to be the miracle. But it's where then that person sadly dies with the energy of feeling that they failed because they didn't win the battle. Well, what if it were all perfect? Because it is. And like you say, depriving someone of the time to speak their truth in this dimension while they can. And we had this question in an article. We were having a conversation recently about how standing here in human form, we see that someone is suffering in their death, so it's always more morphine, more morphine.
Yeah.
Not that that is a bad thing. And just like some people are ready to have natural childbirth,
Mm-hmm.
some people are ready to have a cesarean.
Right.
Some people are ready to have some variation on the theme.
Mm-hmm.
So likewise, some people can more consciously choose to have less pain relief, and it's finding that happy balance. Because the other thing that we pondered was that it's not just the death of a person,
Right.
it's the death of a system.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a death rebirth.
Yeah.
But it's so, is it the primary goal to honor the person whose body is transitioning,
Mm-hmm.
or pay attention, just be curious about the system,
Yeah.
so that there is an agreement
Mm-hmm.
somehow that happens on whether you go easily, whether you don't, when
Right.
you go, who's
Yeah.
there,
Yeah. The
So I think,
agreement is so necessary. Yeah. And
yeah,
like one last thing about that is like that's when I became aware of this whole concept of like the war in the body. Like, you're not just fighting cancer, you're fighting your whole body because
right,
all your cells are connected and communicate. And so you really need to learn to make peace in order to heal and integrate. And
right,
that's how you have the ability to accept and then change, because when my grandmother was dying, and she did die young, she was only a couple years older than my aunt because she had a whole thing happen. But on her deathbed, my mom took us to see her one last time. And my mother is very strictly religious, but they grew up, my family is from Jamaica. It's a third world country, and the spiritual realm blends all the time. So my mother has seen ghosts. She's had encounters that she will never deny. She'll tell you herself. She saw ghosts. She spoke to people who had already passed on, all these sorts of things. Magic happened. And so we went to my grandmother. She took her hands and she said, I know you're thinking this, you're thinking that, but I want you to know it's okay. You can just let go. We love you. We support you. We'll see you very soon, And my grandmother died like within 24 hours, very peacefully,
right.
rather than they were going to wake her up and do some horrific surgery on her. And my mom was like, you can just let go. It's okay. We're here right now. We're letting you know we're all here. We all said goodbye, gave her kisses and hugs. And she passed away in 24 hours, very peacefully and gently, the way she would have preferred, rather than the horrible, gruesome morphine, semi-coma trauma
In
thing,
the hospital, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, acceptance really creates that peaceful transition that we know is possible.
Well, and how for me within our community, I mean, you're doing death work as well.
Yeah.
How do we pay attention to and give permission and take into consideration, the religion? Like, how do you just suspend whatever my belief system might be and step into the belief systems of the family, or the organism, the system, to be, to hold the space? So to consider their cultural background, consider their religious upbringing, so it's being someone's agent, their medical agent. It doesn't mean that they can't speak for themselves, therefore you now say what you want for them.
Right.
It's about a channeling, an
Yeah.
agreement that happens, so that hopefully on paper there's a guideline for what that person would want, so you can stand in that place of uplifting their choices.
Definitely. Yeah, and I made some progress. I will say I did make some progress with my family. In the end, some of the fear won out, but that's because other family members had flown in and they kind of changed the dynamic. But because I spent most of the time with my aunt, I knew her very well. She had already begun to share her stories with me. And so my family would come in and they would say, we need to get her baptized. We need to do this. We need to have these people come in. And I would say, I hear that, like I can see that. And I know you really feel that strongly, but like, how do you think she would feel if she had to do all these things that you want her to do? Do you think she feels strong enough to get up and change her clothes and leave this place where she feels safe and go to a place that she's never been? And, do you really think she wants to do that? And then they're like, okay, well, maybe she doesn't really want to do that. I guess I wouldn't really want to do that. And so we made some progress there, and ultimately they found ways to do things so that they felt satisfied, whether she wanted it or not. But, everybody wanted to appease their minds and make sure she was going to heaven. That's what it came down to. They wanted to make sure.
So their intentions were good.
Things. Yeah. They just wanted to make sure she was getting in the door.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing that being present at a birth, like I remember when I was doing, being present at births often, or being in support of women at births, it was just such a high. It was just, and I got that it's like the veil is thin then. So when you're present, and the same is true when someone's passing, it is such a sacred space. And I know that my family, there are those, some in my family, some, it's like not understanding, like if the door cracks open a little bit, you can let me go. Like no heroics, no anything, where everyone else is attached to that fighting. Well, give it a chance. And what about 2 weeks? And then we'll, no, being close to that veil is so powerful. And that's where I start to doubt, like, is that true? Is that not true? And what maybe.
But my family had that experience as well, about that veil being thin, because the reason why I was able to kind of get through to them wasn't even my doing, right? We were all in the room. There's probably 6 or 7 of us, because we were pretty close knit at the time. And so we're all around her bed, because we would just hang out there whenever we could. And she was towards the end. It was in the last 2 weeks. And she'd had a lot of morphine, but she'd be in and out because she was trying to talk to us.
Right.
But I felt the energy shift in the room, and my mother did too, because she got chills on her hand and she was like, what? And I was like, yeah, somebody came in here. And she was like, oh, what do you mean? Because she was trying to stay in the Christian lane. But then my aunt sat straight up and started talking to their dead brother, because he had come into the room and was like, come with me, Marie. And she got up to go. She was getting ready to go follow him. And my mom was like, lay back down. He didn't mean it. Lay back down. You can go a different way, but I was like, that. And we just looked at each other like, that just happened. Like, we all felt that. We kind of saw the energy come into the room, and she responded to that. So they were like, okay, she's transitioning. Like, there's no stopping at this point, So they had the ministers come into there and do whatever they wanted to do. I wasn't present because I was very empathic at the time and very spongy. So I could only take so much, and then I would have to go away and like hide in the bathroom for a couple hours. But
it was just a few days. I don't remember exactly how many days, but my grandmother had been in the hospital before she went home, and she died at my parents' home. But I was sitting with her in the hospital, and she was, look above her bed and say, stop singing so loud. I'm not ready to go. Just stop it. I'm going home. I'm going home. She didn't want to die in the hospital.
Yeah.
And died a few days later, but she definitely was having that out of body, feeling the energy and the veil being thin. And I know that I've experienced that several times with people. And even when people are heavily sedated, there is that last bit of, they call it anxiety, something, a special name for it, but an alertness that regardless of how much morphine, it can be that moment of alertness where they're getting ready to leave
Yeah.
their body.
Right.
And, you know, with my dear friend, Mary, who passed, her spirit left
Mm-hmm.
at about midnight with a crash of thunder and lightning. You know, it was just
Wow.
boom. And her body didn't let go or transition
Mm-hmm.
until about 10:15 the next day. But we knew that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Wow.
so as crazy as it makes me feel sometimes, I think I'm more grateful than scared or nervous or anxious or upset
Yeah.
that I have that ability, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah, I'm ready whenever. And that's, people die suddenly sometimes when they're afraid to die. That's what kills them, the fear of dying
Right.
versus just like, it's just like when my nephew died, my brother-in-law read this beautiful poem that we all remember, just like the first time. I've only stepped into the next room. And like, that's all we're doing. We're just stepping into the next room. You can't see me, but I'm still in the building,
Yeah. Like Rhonda says, we're all here just to walk one another home,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Well, I so have looked forward to this time.
This has been awesome.
Yes, it's been very, very special for me. And just reaffirming that somehow we are just each doing our best to be our own little grain of sand on the beach of the
Yeah. Ooh.
universe. And just to know that somehow we were able to perceive something that many people don't. I know it's been hard for me to stay embodied, and
Yeah,
it's
me too.
difficult to feel the physical pain, which I have had a lot of. So it is that practice of making friends with the pain. And
Yeah.
when I was so indoctrinated I was well trained by my mom, bless her heart,
Mm-hmm.
to work hard, push through
Yeah.
Catholic thing of sacrificing,
Yeah.
suffering. It's all for the greater good.
Mm-hmm.
The need to be a powerful woman.
Yeah.
But it was, for my mom, it was still within the context of a power over model rather than a power
Right.
with.
Right.
So honestly, I am continuing on my own journey of making friends with the physical ailments, the physical pain, and letting myself know that it's okay if I don't figure it out, or
Yep.
if Joe Dispenza healing doesn't work, or if
Yep.
it's all one
It's
moment
all
in
gonna
time
be
for the
good.
greater.
Yeah. And one of my best friends, she only died last year, and it was because we didn't get to go visit her because of lockdown. She was 102.
Yeah.
And for the last 40 years, she was telling everybody, I'm ready to go whenever. I'm
Yeah.
ready.
Waiting for the
I'm
bus.
fine, But she's
Yeah.
like, he keeps waking me up. I don't know what's the deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I learned a
Well,
lot
yeah.
from her,
Yeah. The one of the people who was there when I had my near drowning, his dad became very much a father figure to me after my dad died, or I turned to him for that wisdom. And he passed when he was 102.
Yeah.
And he was 99, going to get his driver's license. Was the last time he got his driver's license renewed. So when I had a conversation with him on the phone before he passed to say final goodbyes, he said, well, it's really time to go because my driver's license is going to expire. So I don't think I have the energy to renew it this time.
That's awesome.
He was 102. So
Yeah.
Life is a trip. It's just an amazing journey. And we're witnessing, we are witnessing a transition.
For sure.
And
Definitely.
It will be very interesting to see where it all goes. So
I agree.
Well, thank you, Sasha. I hope this is just the first of many conversations.
I think so.
Yeah. And I'll be very grateful to to share this. I know on my YouTube channel, I have a specific playlist that is categorized as the woo-woo part of death. Some people aren't quite ready for
Right.
the woo-woo.
Yep.
But it feels so important to me to provide that aspect of death and dying too. So
Yeah.
thank you a bazillion times over.
Thank you for reaching out and making the connection and co-creating,
Yeah. All righty.